Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Socialist Telly. Couple of teething problems. It's a little while since we've been on. I'm here with one of my guests, Chris Bradburn, who is standing for the Workers' Party GB in Durham, North Durham. I keep wanting to say Durham North all the time for some reason. And we have Tanushka Marah, who is standing down in Hove Portslade, who is trying to join us at the moment but having a few technical issues. So I hope she'll be with us very shortly. It is nice to be back, and thank you for watching. And this looks like Tanushka joining us now. Here we go. Hi, Tanushka.
Hello there. Hi.
So you're live now, just warn you. So just don't say anything you don't want going out for posterity. And I'll just check, because we didn't get a chance to do this beforehand because of the technical issues. But does anybody have any preference about which order we go in? Nobody's got to get away. Is anybody desperate to go and watch the England match, etc.?
I'd love to go second, just so I can settle in. I've just run.
Yeah, that'll give you a chance to get going. So just to say, if anybody is wanting to get away with to watch the match, we do expect to be finished in time for that. So thank you for joining us. I will point out as well, you can comment on the show through the YouTube feed or the Facebook feed. I think it still doesn't work on Twitter/X. But if you want to get your word in on the show or ask a question to the candidates, then pop that in the comments under the video feed on those two platforms. And with a bit of luck, we'll field them here and give people the chance to answer. So, Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you were standing to be elected for WPGB in North Durham.
So I'm Chris. I'm not a career politician. I'm a cybersecurity engineer by trade. I'm a massive nerd. The reason I'm standing is twofold. First, that something is fundamentally wrong with our country when when an ordinary working person like myself looks around and says, "Hang on, I'm retraining all the time to keep ahead of my career, but I still can't support my family. Prices are going up and they're not coming down." And in particular, the northeast areas around me are really neglected, and it's far more than 14 years worth of damage under the Conservatives. And so it's that a regular person saying, "You know what, enough is enough." The second aspect is then finding out that who I thought would be our left candidate, Labour, turns out Labour do not represent working class people anymore. Not only that, it's someone who's been parachuted in from Oxford to an area he has no connection to, put simply as a prize for being good friends and a good politician. So when you have that cauldron of issues together, there's that bit of steel in you that says, "You know what, I have had enough." That if someone needs to represent our area, it needs to be someone who is local, who cares and who understands about our heritage and the pride that we have as people. And I thought, you know what? I won't say the word, I've got a history of being gobby. So if I'm the gobby one, then I'll do it. I'll stand up and I'll do it. So that's why I'm running, is I'm an ordinary person who has had enough, and regular people need to represent regular people because we don't have a seat at the table as working class. And that's it in a nutshell. That's it. It's the frustration with the system.
Okay, now, I mean, probably not many people watching this show won't be aware that you are standing against somebody who's quite notorious from a Labour left point of view as one of the big bogeymen, let's say, of against the left, who's been involved during the Corbyn years. He was very involved in the opposition to Corbyn and the whole kind of propagation of the smears against the Labour Party, etc., that ultimately succeeded and brought down Corbyn's leadership. Luke Akehurst, and he was in the happy for him, I guess, position of being able to declare himself to be the candidate in the contest there in North Durham, which I think is somewhere he's never been before. I mean, how much of that is playing as a factor up in Durham, both in terms of his positions on things like the genocide in Gaza, which is denied, but also the fact that he's not local and doesn't seem to have any perceptible connection to the area.
So I'll split that into two groups of people. And it's not even left versus right; it's older versus younger. The older voters tend to not know about the Gaza side of things, but once they find out who Luke Akehurst is, because it's a staunch, traditionally it's been a safe Labour seat, North Durham. Once they find out that who he is and where he's not connected to the area, there's this sense of, oh, that shouldn't be happening. But they feel like they may not have as much of an alternative and that's where I come in and I explain I'm essentially what Labour should be, someone who cares about and looks after the working class. Then you've got the younger voters who are very much aware of the Gaza and the Palestine issues and are against it, but they then expose the younger people in general are more exposed to things like the Reform Party as what they as is being presented as an alternative. And again, it's the funny thing is that I can't believe it's political, that I care about people and I want to see our area thrive. And to that extent, I sympathise a lot with Reform voters because the Workers' Party and Reform are born out of the same frustration. And we see now we've got centrist politics where we've got the Conservatives and Labour who are essentially the same people swapping the ties every few years, right?
Mm.
Then you've got the Workers' Party and Reform. Now, I disagree with them fundamentally on a lot of things. I think they're being taken for a ride by rich people, right? The Reform voters. But it is a genuine ideological difference that is what Labour used to be and what Conservatives might once have been. And that is galvanizing to a lot of people when they realize that there is some difference again in politics, older or younger. And it's all of these conversations that are playing out on the doorstep. So Luke Akehurst it's a spark to the tinder. What it is actually it's in a good way is Luke Akehurst, being as controversial a figure as he is helping candidates like myself because it forces people to think, do I need to vote the way my parents have always voted? Do I need to vote the way that we have traditionally always voted? Because now you've really got to think again, do Labour represent me? And it's these conversations that I'm having again and again and again. And I'll be completely free with this, that Reform is an attractive option to a lot of people up here because it's born out of the same frustration, which makes me an attractive option to a lot of people up here as well. So a lot of my conversations, once we get past Luke Akehurst, a lot of my conversations revolve to, okay, well, once Reform are done with immigrants, who do you think they're going to go after next? Because Farage has already started making comments about benefits. And I've been trying to explain to people that once immigrants are out, is not his topic of the month, it's going to be the working class next. And that then Luke Akehurst becomes this catalyst for a conversation between, do you want a candidate like myself who wants to bring everyone up? Or do you want a candidate like the Reform Party who want to push other people down in the hopes that you might be one of the million who rises to the top? And that's the way the conversations are going.
That's interesting. Now, I saw your, or a clip of it at least, I don't think it was the whole thing, interview that you did with not the Andrew Marr show. And on that, you mentioned that you'd only seen, I think, 2 homes with Labour posters up in the window and they were next door to each other, perhaps related, we don't know. What's the score now? Is it still the same as before?
Pretty much, yeah. The worst thing is about it being the situation is apathy is just as dangerous as zealotry. And the reason for that, especially with candidates like myself and even the Reform guy, right? Because there's a Reform guy in this ballot, and I'm here as well. And as I mentioned, we present a genuine ideological difference, right? We're both fighting apathy, and that apathy is, I've always voted Labour, my parents have always voted Labour, and it's in a world where in an area, where we're so downtrodden by decades. We had the miners' strikes, and then steadily, it's not, like I said, it's not 14 years of austerity that have made North Durham as what it is now. It's been decades. People are so downtrodden by that they think, oh, I'll just go and vote the way I've always voted because nothing's going to change. So for Luke Akehurst, and you'll notice this, a lot of Labour and Conservatives and what have you in the safe seats, they're not really encouraging people to go out and vote. They're not encouraging them to register to vote because, as I've said once, apathy to me, as a smaller candidate, is just as dangerous as zealotry, because all Labour need to win is for people to be apathetic and do the easy thing of not thinking about it.
And I mean, what are the issues then? Obviously, you talked about the basically getting trodden on by the rest of the country, by government, certainly, for a long time. People might be able to tell from our accents, I don't know, but we come from very similar neck of the woods originally. And Middlesbrough, where I come from, was crapped on from a height by successive governments. Not that much different during the Blair years, I have to say, a little bit better. But there doesn't seem to be anything in the Labour Party offer which is going to make any difference at all, as far as I can tell, to the lives of people in the areas that you and I come from. And but I mean, for people who might not know, because they may never have ventured that far north, what's life like, and what are the issues there for people who you're hoping are going to vote for you?
The three main issues, and this is, I seem to have done what people find quite unusual for a candidate. I've went and talked to people, and I've actually listened to them. And then once I found out what the issues were, I've then went and talked to experts in the area, right? So the three main, and said, what do we need to do? What's the best way to deal with this? The three main issues that I could sum up are NHS waiting times are out of control. Especially, it makes it more dangerous in North Durham because we're not right next to hospitals. Like, take Stockton, for example. You're about 5 minutes away from either North Tees or James Cook, wherever you are. Like, you're never far away from a hospital. We are quite far away from hospitals if something happens. So NHS wait, and then when you get there, you've got to wait for a long time to be seen, like hours upon hours. So NHS waiting times. We've got high the national average population of SEND kids, or kids with special needs and disabilities. But we're still massively underfunded, and the staff are underpaid and overworked. Thirdly, the local services, so I'm talking about youth projects, crisis services, which is things, like food banks, community pantries, things that I've attended the launches of and helped out at, they're also not getting the funding. Now, what then is very interesting here, there is a common thread that links all of these. That one, the staff are overworked and underpaid, and two, there is an inordinate amount of red tape and bloat in processes around these services that does nothing except line the pockets of a few. So the example for the NHS is that doctors and nurses are not able to treat patients or be as efficient as they need to because they have so many not checks and balances, that's different. They have processes in place and bureaucracy that stops them from giving people the care they need, and it increases the wait times exponentially. Then you've got the education with the SEND, where again the process for getting the funding and making your case as to why you need more SEND resource, or you need the resource to hire and retain staff, is increased. There's more bureaucracy around that. And then as well, you go to the local services, and we have boots on the ground local services, which we could do with more of, but the ones we do have do a very important job. But again, it's larger organizations and these shadows behind them that are better at filling out forms, or they're coming up with bureaucratic processes. Fundamentally, all three issues suffer from the same problem. The money and the authority is not in the hands of the workers who are best placed to make those decisions. Now, as a cybersecurity engineer, right, I'm empowered to make decisions because that's my area of knowledge. Nobody else is able to make a decision on like a technical level. I just this needs to happen because of this, and this. And you're empowered to make those decisions. That's exactly what I want to implement for the people of North Durham. And that's really resonated, is that we need to cut through all this red tape for people who are just getting a salary for filling out forms, jobs that don't need to exist, that is having a material impact on regular people day to day, getting the services they need. And it's just really as simple as that. It's such a common thread of there's so much bureaucratic bloat for the and whoever we had this before, for the benefit of a few, many are suffering.
Yeah, so I mean, the NHS particularly. I mean, I don't know how much you know about it, but Squawk Box originally started off as an NHS site. That was its main topic to begin with. And people in your area, probably similar to here in Liverpool, where I live now, are not really aware of what the government's plans are for the NHS, what the government's been intentionally doing. They tend to think it's all because of underfunding or because of bureaucracy or whatever it is. But really, it's a this whole integrated care, as they badge it these days, is a copy of an American system, which rewards the people who are supposed to be providing health care for not providing it. And they actually get a share. If they don't spend money on treating people, they get a share of the money that they don't spend, which is just absolutely crazy. But that's where we are. And again, it may come in useful on the campaign trail if anybody's aware of it. But the Labour Party supports that system just as much as the Conservatives do, and in fact intend to kind of roll it out further. And when you hear Wes Streeting talk about reform, that's the kind of thing that he's talking about.
Yeah, so that was one thing that really troubled me, was seeing that Labour had taken out of the manifesto that the NHS is not for sale. So the Workers' Party position is very, very clear on this, is that the NHS needs to be fully renationalised as a not-for-profit, but specifically for public good endeavour. And what you've said there is, I'll be able again. I'm a very big believer in that. When you learn something new, you pass that knowledge on as soon as you can. There's no knowledge hoarding here. So I'll be telling the voters that, I'll go away and I'll do more of the research. I didn't know it was an exact copy of an American model, or that you profit from not treating. But it makes sense, because we're currently, is there something like 72 private providers that make up some parts of the NHS? I think I'd heard that somewhere, that there's elements of private care that are linked in together. And of course, if it's an enterprise, cost cutting.
Yeah, they're breaking it down as well into 40 odd, I think it is, kind of area health authorities now, what it amounts to. I mean, the fact that in America they call it accountable care, and when they first started it here, they called it accountable care as well, until people cottoned on to what accountable care means in America, and they thought we don't want to use that name, so they swapped the name but didn't change anything about the plan. And again, the big kind of scandal starting to bubble now is the fact that the government has pushed through, not long before the election was called, backdoor legislation, a so-called statutory instrument, to broaden the use of people who dress like doctors and present themselves like doctors but aren't medically trained, called medical associates or physician associates, and even anaesthetists running operations who aren't fully trained as medical anaesthetists. And again, that's all part of the same plan: cut the costs so that people can make more profit, and then flog it off and privatise it. And it all comes under this integrated care umbrella. So if you have the time, when you with everything else I'm sure you're doing, then that will be worth having a look at. So we'll come on to Tanushka in a minute, who I don't know how similar her story is going to be to yours, but before we move on, what's your kind of, if you had 3 points you really wanted to get across to the voters in North Durham, what would you want to tell them? Get this out now, and then somebody might clip it for you later.
I am here as a representative of the community. I'm not here. Look past me as part of the Workers' Party. Look past everything except me as me. I'm your neighbour, and I'm standing up because no one else would, in the way that we need, right? I am here in the community. I know for a fact how harmful the waiting times are, because I'm scared to death that if my daughter gets sick, we're going to have to drive 20 minutes to Shotley Bridge, and then we don't know, or Dryburn, which is not a great place to want to go for healthcare, and we're going to have to wait the same amount of hours you are. That I'm here. I am your neighbour standing up because we need the representation. I know what Stanley Front Street is like because I walk down it. I know what Chesley Street is like because I drop my wife off to work there. Like, that's what I need people to understand, is that I am here and I am local. The second point I need people to understand is that the hardest thing, for it might seem politically, is for you to care, but we are. I represent what is a genuine care for the community, and again, I am here as a person. I will be in the community as a person. I will not be in Westminster. I won't be down in London all the time playing big party politics, messing about with nation states like Israel. I'll be in Durham. I'll be trying to fix Stanley. I'll be trying to fix Chesley Street. And the third point is that if you're stuck between me and reform, one, I'm glad you've got there in the first place, that you've got to the point where you're considering two genuine ideological differences. But remember that I am concerned with raising everyone up together and make sure that nobody gets left behind. Whereas reform, you are banking on you being the person who wins the lottery in order to benefit from that. And it's those three things that I'd want people to understand.
Excellent. And I'll just quickly ask, I mean, it does sound from the way you're talking as though you perceive reform maybe as more of a threat than the Labour Party. I mean, how do you see the campaign breaking out when people go to the ballot box?
Ideologically, I see their leaders as a threat ideologically. On a bigger scale, like logistically, again, like I said, I'm fighting against the people who would vote for me if they understood or they took the time to understood what I'm about. But again, my biggest enemy is apathy being in it. And that's why Luke Akehurst was given one of the safest seats for one of the lowest Muslim populations, because it was very calculated that he'd be able to be parachuted here and there'd be the minimal fuss, which is still a significant amount of fuss, but the minimal fuss. And that's what I'm fighting against. So I'm fighting ideological fight and I'm fighting the logistic fight. And both of them involves getting out there, knocking on people's doors and talking to people.
Very good. Tanushka, if we bring you in now, obviously, Chris, if you have any questions for Tanushka as well, feel free to jump up. We want to keep it fairly free flowing. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you've come to be standing in Hove Portslade.
Thank you. I'm a theatre director. I've been making theatre for 25 years. And now I specialise in making work with young people, especially young people from marginalised backgrounds, whether that's class, race, neurodiversity, the whole thing. So that's brought me very close to many issues at home. Am I echoing? Am I okay? Anyway.
No, it sounds pretty good.
Okay. And I've always, you make theatre because you've got something to say. You know, you don't make theatre. You'd go into movies if you wanted to make big bucks. And especially the kind of theatre I make, a lot of it being political. So these questions are always on my mind. They're always how I've lived my life. And what happened was, with the devastating live streamed genocide that we're seeing, I became more active, taking theatre to the streets. And then I didn't know there was a search for a left-wing representative in the next general election. So different groups asked if I would stand. I had no intention of standing or being a politician. And then I realized that I had all the support around me to do it and some of the skills. And why would you turn your back on a really effective route of direct action and having that voice on those platforms? Most beautifully, and it's a real honor, and people are saying this all the time, there is a chance to participate in democracy in a really positive and passionate way now for all the people standing, like Chris and people from the collective, and all these movements, these movements to put in independence have really allowed people to participate. So that's, philosophically, that's one thing, but also in terms of agitating and making it clear and putting up a fight, it's essential. I'm standing against Peter Kyle, who is a vice chair of Labour Friends of Israel, and Gaza brought me to the table. But when I'm at the table, we're here to discuss everything, including our public services, our climate, housing, workers' rights, and our foreign policy and addiction to militarism. And I believe they are all completely related. Yeah.
And in terms of I mean, let's unpack that a little bit, because as you mentioned, Kyle's a director of or a vice chair of LFI. Up in the north, we've got Akehurst, who is his day job is We Believe in Israel. I know for a fact that Akehurst has made tweets, he might have deleted them now since he became a candidate, where he actually denied there was a genocide going on. What's Peter Kyle's position been on that? What has he actually come out and said? And how did he vote, most importantly, when it came to the early kind of ceasefire votes, when everybody was clamouring for Labour to actually stand up and demand an end to the killing?
It's very, he's the king of waffle and baffle. I've been on 2 hustings where he was saying that he has voted, and it's
you could get them to attend a hustings.
Well, I've been twice, yes, but most of the hustings, I've done 6, have been without him or without Labour. They mentioned the SNP motion, which was frankly scuppered by Labour. So whatever your imaginary vote was there, we can see it. We can just Google it. I've seen it black and white. So I did think, and I did say there is gaslighting, and then there's just lying. He's trying to do a softly, but there, and trying to blame it on, like, we've got to go through the motions, and being a friend of is being with the left wing. Being a Labour friend of Israel is staying in there with the left wing, which gives me the opportunity to negotiate. This is urgency. This is a genocide. There are more children dead than there are in primary school in Brighton and Hove. It is one of the top priorities for people from low-income backgrounds who can't even, struggling to put food on the table. This isn't just empathy. This is a horror show. And to try and make it in any way a liberal issue, a sort of, well, maybe this, maybe that. This is, and I say this often, this is a never again moment in history, and it's changed my life and brought me to stand. So there is no friend of Israel in an apartheid state and in a genocide. We blame people for liking tweets, for standing on platforms, for saying hello to the wrong person. But right now, Israel are in the docks for crimes against humanity, for war crimes, for a genocide. They are being plausibly, they could be arrest warrants. And that you can say you are a friend of Israel at a time like now. That has to be reconsidered. It's just not fair to be firing someone like Faiza Shaheen and keeping someone like Peter Kyle. It is a completely double standard. And it's,
Yes. I mean, it may be background for some. I don't know if you would have been linked to Labour at the time, but back in 2018, all of Brighton and Hove's constituency Labour parties, all 3 of them, put motions forward to censure Labour Friends of Israel because there was a still horrific but much smaller slaughter of Palestinian civilians by Israel back then, when and the LFI group issued a statement blaming Palestinians for getting killed, essentially. And the United Nations condemned those. Doctors Without Borders condemned it. Labour then stepped in 2021 and banned members in Hove Portslade from discussing even a motion about the killing that was going on in 2021. So this bigotry is not a new issue, sadly, and it seems to be the party clamping down on members in Brighton who seem generally very aware of what's going on and very opposed to it from saying anything that's going to rock the boat.
Yeah.
How are you finding the reaction from voters there?
Surprisingly positive, actually. I always wanted this to be, and I know everyone says this, and we all are trying our best, and I think this is what we're doing. We want a people's movement, and we want to be representative of people's voice. So when you knock on the door and you say to people, we're a people's movement, and we want to know what's on your mind for this general election? Immediately people open up, and usually something on their mind is one of the 5 pledges we stand on. And there's a dialogue. Even strangely, there are some Tories going to vote for me. It's peculiar. There's a real all of the policies are still being written, and they are being written from people's assemblies with people of experience. So we've had an NHS one, which deeply informed us all. We're kind of making our way through all the different things that we stand on, but obviously with 6 weeks, there's only so much you can do. The reaction on the doorstep is very surprising. It is, because most people want to slam the door when you say you're here for the general election, and then you say neither Tory nor Labour, and then they're like furious, and then we're like, we are doing this because we're sick of Tory and Labour. They are mirroring each other with flags and fear, and it's just really, really disturbing who they're punching down on to win votes. And it is the most vulnerable of our society, and it's deeply uncivilized behaviour to act like this. And it's like something out of, GCSE English literature. What is scapegoating? Well, here it is. So it's really great. And then there's been, and then there's people who kind of are not going to place their risk with an independent, but we've got loads of boards out, we've got loads of posters up. It's quite something, actually. I think momentum is really taking off. And
have you seen the same as Chris, that there's not many Labour ones, or are people still prepared to stand up and admit to voting for Labour?
The Labour ones look really measly and nasty, the way they've used the British flag. As someone who is born here, people love to say she's Palestinian. I'm Streatham, born in Streatham. And there's so much I love about this country. It really could be a great country if we used our resources and we used our history of protest, actually, and socialism and literature and art. If we used this to actually benefit each other through governance, rather than just be at the behest of private corporations and arms deals and a sort of addiction to, I believe colonialism is very much linked to those arms deals and those private interests. So yes, to see that Labour poster, I'm not seeing not much. I happen to live in Pavilion, which is where Caroline Lucas was, and there's a lot of green up, which is hopeful. And maybe it's just narcissism, but I seem to be seeing a good amount of posters for our campaign. So, yeah.
Yes. And has Labour stooped to very dirty campaigning, as I've seen them do in quite a few other areas when they feel threatened?
I think they've left the Zionist extremists to that. They're having fun now. They really are with me. And I guess it's a sign that our campaign is working, because we have so many people of Jewish faith and heritage in our campaign. We have a real mix of people. And in Brighton and Hove, it's very, very strong, that movement in integration. But there has been some dirt happening now. And it's okay, because I just know absolutely 100%. I'm very well versed, and I've been brought up in this issue, so I just know that I'm not anti-Semitic, so they can say what they want. But it's just, but yeah, I mean, they're stooping to very low levels now.
Yes. Well, as Becky's pointed out there, I mean, Kyle and Akehurst were both featured, I believe, in the Labour Files documentary on what went on in the party. And Chris, up in your neck of the woods, Mr. Akehurst was tweeting the other day thanking one guy for turning up, who was one of the stars of the Al Jazeera undercover expose, the lobby. Who was talking about how closely he was working with
there was another
embassy in terms of trying to influence Labour's politics in favour of Israel. And I mean, people treat sometimes this phrase, the lobby, as a some kind of dirty word or anti-Semitism, but I mean, loads of countries lobby for their interests. Companies lobby for their interests. All sorts of groups lobby for their interests. Not all of them do it by planting their own groups within political parties to try and have direct influence on that. But that's something to do with the methodology there. But it does seem to be that Labour Party candidates are struggling in all kinds of places, even here in Liverpool, to get people out on the streets to campaign for them. I did see one solitary person delivering leaflets today in my constituency, but you see crowds of people out supporting our independent candidate Sam Gorst, who I'll give a mention to. And hi, Sam, just in case you're watching.
I'm on the same, I believe, collective group, if I think right. I'm on a few,
right, okay.
But collective is with Sam Gorst, and their campaign looks really great. And I love Liverpool. I actually spent a lot of time making theatre in Liverpool.
All right, okay.
It's my sort of creative home. It's a brilliant place.
Yes, well, as you can tell, I'm not from here, but I do love living here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand it over to you two guys now, because people are not on here to listen to me blather on. But in terms of your own experiences, campaigning, etc., if there's anything you want to share that you found useful, if there's any particular observations that you've had about what works, what doesn't, etc., have at it. If you've got questions for each other, go for that. And obviously, if people want to drop any questions into the chat, that's still open, so you're able to do that, and I'll pop them up on the screen as much as possible.
So, well, I'll go first. So one thing that voters seem to have found quite unusual is my unwillingness to kind of shy away from direct questions. And so one of the things I've done is I've set up, so we've got, the way it works up here, we've got a couple of big towns and we've got pit villages around, and I've set up Q&As. Well, my wife has done a lot of the organisation. She's been fantastic. But what we've done is set up Q&As in various different places right up until the general elections, a chance for people to come, have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. It's just called a cuppa with Chris. And it's a chat. And we've had the first one, and I moved the one from tonight to Friday because of the England match and because of this. But voters seem quite taken aback that I'm willing to be perfectly candid with them and reach out to them and just have that kind of dialogue directly to them rather than just pattern off manifesto points. Tanushka, have you had anything similar? Like when you've engaged with people directly, have they been quite surprised the way that you've gone about it? That's not what the established parties might do.
Yeah, I think the idea of 4 men in the back of a pub writing a manifesto, those days are over in terms of from the left. And I think that there's people really enjoy being included. And I think those ways of being included need to be fun. I've taken a lot of what I've done through my work with theatre, which is I've studied inclusion and how people can be mobilized to do things for themselves. So the very first thing we did in our campaign was hold a public meeting called Let's Mobilize. And about 60 people came. And the idea was we just set up tables with different parts of the campaign, and people went and sat at them and created their own groups and created their own ideas and structures. And that's that's translated to WhatsApp, a WhatsApp community. But I always say that the revolution will not be WhatsApped. We do need to meet in person, and we need to make that a joyful meeting. It needs to be a place where people want to come. So I've used things like, so on Saturday there's ways of doing that in a way that you do cultural events so that people feel want to belong, and they need to want to belong after the 4th of July. That's the whole point, to build a sustainable movement. I've been in many movements where things around control feel more important than people feeling at liberty to go off and create for themselves. So it's been very much sort of anti-branding, just go off. There are community events happening that I don't know are happening in our campaign, and that's the way it should be.
Can't imagine why anybody would be surprised at a politician not wanting to give a direct answer to a question. Well, there's a question in here from Stop the Cuts UK. I assume he or she means this in practical, concrete terms. what are each of the candidates doing to break the habits of former Labour voters? Have you come across any kind of useful methods to kind of get people to stop and think about, you know, the reflective?
I think it's very simple, and you don't have to be an economist to explain that there is enough money in this country, and that there is enough money in this country for our public services to run the way they should, that there shouldn't be anyone homeless or professionals in our public services using food banks on their way home and having to strike, that this is all a deliberate target on our public services, because we protect offshore accounts, we protect corporation taxes, and we protect the strongest, highest earners paying as much national insurance as we pay. The difference is 6%. So, and that Labour are going to do nothing to protect this, that Labour are completely committed to privatisation within all of our public services, and that if we ended up talking about Gaza and they don't really care, there is also the knowledge that the money we spend on militarism could be put into our NHS, you know, if you just want to argue on economic terms. So all of these are very easy ways that basically Labour are going to give us the same as Tory. So why not put your vote somewhere else? The other thing is, because Labour are probably going to win, voting for an independent to hold them to an account is actually a really strategic thing to do. You don't need to worry about splitting the vote.
Goodness me. Well, if Tanushka is a scalpel with that very skillful answer, I'm more of a sledgehammer, because you can see there just on the left just how different you can be in their approaches. Because my approach is quite different in that in North, the Durham coal fields, which are, you know, we've got a very rich history of trade unionism, of mining, because that's where the wealth came from, and then those were shut down. So when I'm encountering staunch Labour voters, particularly the older generation, I'll straight up ask them, I'll say, what you know about Labour now, is that the Labour that your mum and dad voted for? Is that the Labour that you voted for when you were younger? Is that the Labour you want to vote for? Do you feel safer with your pension now with this Labour? Do you think you're going to be better off? And then I've also a couple of times I've said, like, if you could speak to the miners who were striking because of the cancelled overtime, and if you could speak to them, do you think they'd be happy if you were voting for a party like Labour? Or if you described it to them without the name, do you think they would even call it Labour? And that is, as well as that, I've also, when Luke Akehurst comes up, a big thing that really gets people going is your pride, like your pride in your community and your pride for your heritage. And that is something that transcends skin color, sexuality, everything. It's having that pride. Is that, are you happy to be given away as a prize to someone as part of big party politics, or do you have more pride than that? And then once we have that discussion, and we're talking about what I stand for, and as I mentioned, like, I'm part of the Workers' Party, but and like Tanushka said, Labour will win regardless. What we need to make sure is that there are people with a conscience on the left there who can provide. And I think it was someone in one of Crispin's shows, not the Andrew Marr show, who said, if you need to have the conditions to rebuild the left properly, that's why you need independents. That's why you need socialists in the Labour majority. And that's what I'm getting across to people. So in answer to Stop the Cuts question, I go in very brute force, unemotive, because that's the reason I'm involved. It's emotive that we have more pride than this, and this is not the same Labour Party that's represented our area historically. And we need people like me and Tanushka to be the conscience to rebuild the left to what it should be prior to Tony Blair, probably. But, Corbyn was the best chance we might have had of that. But of course, that was sabotage from the inside. And I heard someone say in an interview, treachery is to be expected in politics. That phrase right there sums up everything wrong. And that is why people like myself, people like Tanushka, even people like Reform are standing, is because that is not to be accepted in a decent civilized society whatsoever. So a long answer to a short question is I'm going in there and I'm just cutting through the facade of you as a person. Are you willing to be treated like this?
And just a quick question for me that's just occurred to me, but we've seen in quite a few places now allegations that Labour have persuaded so-called independent candidates to stand as a means of dividing the vote. Has that been going on in your battlegrounds?
I can answer this really quickly, because in mine, not Paul Smith, I agree with you, Labour is now a Thatcherite party, yeah. In my constituency, I don't think so, because we've got the Green candidate who's a paper candidate, just so they can say they fielded them. Lib Dem, Conservative, not a chance. Labour, Reform. There was one independent, but he withdrew. And there's a Social Democratic Party, but I don't think he's anything. But you might have heard of in Blackburn with the Workers' Party candidate that his independent opponent Adnan would not step down. And
this is Craig Murray, for people who don't know,
Craig
well-known former ambassador who's standing for the Workers' Party.
Yeah, so Craig and the Adnan, the independent, there was some negotiations about one of them standing down, and then he reneged on it, and it just seems a bit too off to a lot of people. It just seems a bit too fractious this close to the election for something like this to happen. So not in my constituency, but colleagues in the party, I am aware of very heavily suspected Labour is trying to split the vote with them.
Yes. I mean, if people aren't aware of that, there was this proposal so that they didn't split the kind of pro-Gaza vote among the community there, that they would toss a coin, and whoever won the coin toss would stay in, whoever lost would drop out. Craig Murray agreed to that because he wants to win for the sake of the people of Gaza, and the other guy refused that, claiming that he found it offensive that it would even be suggested, but it had actually been suggested by Muslim organisation, the Five Pillars, who are horrified that at least on the part of one, there's a refusal to be willing to drop out for the sake of the greater good. And what about you, Tanushka? What's your situation down there in Brighton?
It's quite straightforward, really. There is a Green paper candidate who I met before the campaign started. I think we might lose some votes to people who don't know about the campaign yet, because we had such a short time to Green. But Lib Dem, yeah, it's just the usuals. I've been on lots of hustings with Greens and Lib Dems, and the strangest thing happened, which was the time I got most upset about Gaza was being on a platform with Lib Dems and Greens, who all call for a ceasefire. And something happened to me. I actually burst into tears in a hustings, and I haven't cried about Gaza for about 2 months. I thought I've got no feelings. And it was so embarrassing, but I was so enraged at the calmness of which people spoke about it. And I feel like the huge difference, the Greens, I think Sian Berry's great, and it's good we're going to have her in Parliament, I hope. But I feel that it's a luxury to put that in the back, not in the foreground. It is a foreground issue, and when it's wrapped up in any kind of equivalency or any kind of look at humanity, that this is what humans do, it's actually really upsetting, because you're witnessing a murder, and a deliberate targeted murder on an ethnic group. So I found that really interesting, is where I stepped away from Lib Dems and Green in that moment. I realised, and it wasn't just with everything like that. We're not calling for fairness. We're calling for justice. And that's a cry for justice. And in that cry is rage. And in that cry is joy. And in that cry is collective mobilisation. So suddenly I realised, oh my God, I look forward to the day when we have a broad left coalition, and we're going to have that in 5 years' time, because Reform will be the opposition. So we've got to stop being so fussy and get our act together in 5 years' time. However, in right now, I'm like, okay, I see the difference. This is an Angela Davis moment. This is not a kind of call for fairness. because fairness presumes that we're all okay. But we've got children starving in this country, and we are supporting the systematic starvation of children in Gaza and Sudan and Yemen. So the inequality in this country is of gruesome levels, stronger than in Victorian days. So
Yes.
talking about fairness,
It's not known as kid starver for nothing, and I mean that's one of the biggest. After his claim that Israel had the right to starve Palestinians, his readiness to starve kids here is probably the next biggest scandal, I think, and that's I'm absolutely raging about that, because it's the shamelessness of them coming in and just claiming to be using change as the only word on their campaign literature pretty much, and they've essentially promised that they won't change anything, because they said they're going to stick to the same financial plans, they're going to stick to the same political plans. I think if anything they'll be more authoritarian and just try and do away with the growing dissent over Gaza by cracking down on it, because that's what authoritarians do. And his instincts all go in that direction. Couldn't wait to condemn these environment campaigners for throwing corn flour, I think it was, on Stonehenge, and wanted the full force of the law against them, sending the troops and all that. So, okay, we'll go for one more minute each. If there's any one message you want to get across in the last minute, so we can let people get away and watch the footy you want to, then please go for it. Tanushka, you go first, seeing as you waited for your turn.
This really is a moment to mobilise. This really is a moment where, if you've ever watched the movie Network, you open the window and you shout, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." So don't shout out the window. Don't shout at your kitchen table. Don't shout at the radio or at your phone. Get in touch with your people who are standing against this cruel system, and support them and be part of a movement. And you could really be surprised at the results. Just be brave and get on with it.
And Chris?
Tanushka mentioned it briefly, but I think it bears saying again. What I've seen over the course of this campaign is people who would ordinarily not agree with me or get along with my views have galvanized together, because we understand that there is a bigger threat in Labour, there is a bigger threat in reform, and that there is a bigger threat in apathy. And there is now people behind me, and people who even go out and canvass for me, who would not ordinarily share the same views. And I just want to repeat that it's that message of unity that I'm spreading. Like, unity doesn't mean that everybody gets along all together all the time. Unity for me means that we've got a common thread that unites us, so that we can look past any of the differences we have. And if there's anybody who's on the fence in North Durham watching this who thinks I might vote for Greens, I might vote for whoever, but I like what Chris is saying, then do that. Have the courage, like Tanushka said, have the courage to vote for me. Have the courage to vote for someone who is local, who cares about local issues, who will improve our lives, and will not politicize a morality issue, which is Gaza. Have the courage to look past and understand we might not agree on everything, but we can agree on enough that it will improve all of our lives.
Brilliant. I'm just trying to put up there, and for some reason they won't put up without crushing the addresses together. But I think I may have the proper website addresses there. Just tell that quickly, and then if anybody's wanting to look and know where they can come and chip in financially to support the campaign or provide practical help if they're within reach, let me know if those addresses are wrong. Do they look all right?
Looks fine to me, yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck.
Thank you.
I heard today that people are predicting that the Lib Dems could be the official opposition because the Tories are imploding so badly. And God help us if that's if we're relying on them to actually oppose anything, because we've seen what they're like. And so thank you everybody who's watched. Do share this so people can hear what our two candidates are about. If you're watching, and tune in for more from Socialist Telly, no doubt, before the end of the campaign. And good luck both here in your respective constituencies. I hope you do well.
Good luck,
Cheers,
Chris.
Paul. Thanks. Cheers, Tanushka. Good luck.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.